prove the time that's difficult. But that will come hopefully in time. It's just like, so that's basically what I'm here, is to add some credibility to what they're saying, not to swallow their story, but to, there's something here that warrants investigation and further investigation, and that's what my role is in, as I say, writing the first book. We're working on a second book and also publishing a newsletter to further inform people on what we are finding. And I think we're going to be very, very, we're going to have a lot more stuff coming, I can guarantee you that.
Essentially, what they would do is they would go out into the public. They first looked for streetwise. They were interested mainly in blonde, blue-eyed boys. They centered on the ages of maybe 10 to 16, 17. Although, as Duncan pointed out, they went a lot younger, a lot older. And what they were doing with these boys, outside the research end of it, would have multiple parts of the project. They would take these boys and they would essentially indoctrinate them, and they would whip them to within an inch of their life. You know, bestiality, brutality. The idea was they wanted to break the mind. When the mind was broken at that extreme point of fear, there were two things they were interested in. There had to be an alien connection into this, because there's reports of some sort of technological device that would gather the patterns of fear. There's also reports that there were some hormones removed from the bodies after the height of fear point. Secondly, they would electromagnetically capture the mind patterns that were released from the body. They were stored in a big computer system. They would manipulate and redesign the mind, literally redesign it. Then they would use the transmitter and put that mind, that new mind, back into the body through a human psychic adept, would like reinstall it through psychosexual means. Now, the reason they picked Duncan for this is he's blonde, blue-eyed, the whole 9 yards of it. So they had to pick blonde, blue-eyed people, because part of Duncan's mind would become part of the boy's mind. Means the boy would have a third his original mind, third of his mind would be computer-oriented, and the other third would be based upon the personality, consciousness of the transmitter system, Duncan, and anyone else that had an input to it. And they would want to pick the mind, so 2/3 of the mind, or maybe a third to 2/3 of the mind, will still be compatible with the body. The idea is, if you take your mind out of your body, you would have to, in order to have it inhabit properly and not be sickly, physically sickly, you'd have to put that mind back in a genetically similar body. This is what they were looking for, was the mind that would be added from the reinsert programmer, whatever you want to call him, would have to be compatible with the body. So they'd have to pick kids of the same body type of the people they were programming. We believe they had Italians, we believe they had Irish, and they had blonde, blue-eyed types. Irish, Anglo-Saxon, and then blonde, blue-eyed types for what they were doing. Now, these kids, once they were processed, the ones that lived and survived, we have information from deprogramming 2 boys that essentially they would be sent into special government projects, into genetic research. They would be put back in with their families, or they would be sent off as workers. They could configure the mind to be the perfect worker, for instance. This is what we know of the Montauk Boy Project. We know the big long bunker just north of the radar hill was where they did the work, because we've deprogrammed 3 Montauk boys and they all remember that bunker. In fact, they almost go into fright when they see pictures of it. But they don't go into that degree of fright when they see the overall base itself. As their main memories is in that bunker. They describe that room that has a 3-sided room and then 2 sides this way. They describe a balcony. All this is all three in common. Describe a balcony. You can see today there were big hooks that a balcony was hung on.
Mm-hmm.
So we have located the area. Now we've had a number of sensitives, including Helga, in there, do a read on it, and they can feel the horror and the fright and all this that was done in there.
Mm-hmm.
And Duncan broke down in one of the bunkers and was essentially trying, I guess, to repent or saying he's sorry or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, we have reason to believe that we've located the area they did this in.
Mm-hmm.
That, in a nutshell, is what the Boys Project was about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. How long did that last? Between what periods do you?
Well, we figure it started probably in the 60s out at Montauk.
Mm-hmm.
And probably it wasn't as advanced until they got the mind control project going.
Yeah.
Where they could
So
do
that
the
was an
actual
aspect
research.
of maybe a larger project?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we believe it's still going on.
And it's still going on yet.
Somewhere else?
Now in Montauk,
Oh, yeah?
in the underground.
The same type of control? Manipulation?
Well, we've
mental
heard
manipulation?
rumors of kidnapping still being done as late as 88. If they're working in 88, they're probably still working.
Yeah.
That's like only 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
She leaves the body and they come out with these fantastic stories, yet they're poohooed.
Mm-hmm.
So we all come out from children in that
Yeah.
sense, that unstructured, how do we say, unbarriered sense of love and hate. The other than all the space-time and the Boys Project, certainly is that very queer sense. But one of the buildings I walked into, that what I came up with, that E.T., that very
Yes, that yellow house. Yeah.
very strange discourse of energy that was very prevalent. And there was on Preston's video, there's this handrail that's so very low.
Yeah, it's low.
Very,
Very
low,
low.
to the. There's other
Number of
almost
the
tiles.
hand railings in these buildings were low,
Mm-hmm.
as if either small people or children going up and down those stairs.
Mm-hmm.
I think what you're asking about is the alien involvement.
Yeah, of which I don't have much recall in my sense. That's very different.
Mm-hmm.
I was
Were
very.
you aware of it when you were involved?
I'm sure I was. There's a particular pattern, or vulgarity is not the word, but it's a raw energy sense that some of the ET groups have. Certainly not
Yeah.
all. The more evolved or the more forgiving type. But there are, the Preston's got 3 or 4 stories, and I don't mean to say it's a story per se, but cataloging of some of his memories regarding some of the forms you were involved in.
Mm-hmm. Well, if in the mid-70s you went down to about the 2nd and 3rd level underground at Montauk, this stretched out for miles as you got down. You know, each level built bigger and bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And the bottom levels maybe were 5 miles square on a side.
Mm-hmm.
In the 2nd and 3rd levels, all of a sudden there appeared in the mid-70s a UFO underground, a disc-shaped flying saucer. And somehow we believe this is one of the sources that were trapped in the Eldridge experiment. And, you know, as Duncan says, it potentialized itself. It took a number of years to appear. All of a sudden, in the mid-70s, 75, 76, there it was, solid. And it was sitting in a huge magnetite deposit, because there's a lot of magnetite out at Montauk. This, for some reason, disturbs the anti-gravity drive of the UFO, so it couldn't get out. It was stuck there. So, of course, this would be the first alien involvement. You have spacecraft out there. They alien constructed spacecraft. Now, of course, there are some live aliens taken out of that thing. Al Bielek can tell you quite a nice story that he was involved in communicating with the aliens out that were underground. Now, later on, the whole Montauk project, when we started to go deeper into the mind aspect and the time aspect, there was a lot of implementation of alien technology at Montauk. I personally believe that Montauk was most likely a test bed for some of the technology interchange between the aliens and the U.S. government. That they were trying out a lot of these great ideas they got. They're also trying to replicate systems and technologies they had on the captured, crashed UFOs. Also, I can remember I had an office in the radar tower. It was the first office on the second floor in the back. Next to my office was another office, and I remember, I'll swear on a stack of Bibles, I remember a lizard man in that office. It was His Highness Draco something. I can't remember the other name. And he was about 6 foot, 7 foot tall, had sort of like scaly skin, humanoid. He walked erect like we do, had 2 arms, 2 legs. He had a tail, but it really didn't show most of the time. He had somewhat of a humanoid face, strange eyes, a big mouth, and, you know, looked like what you would expect if you're going to put together a lizard man. There was a being on Star Trek called the Gorn that Captain Kirk fought on this planet. This man that I worked next to sort of resembled that being. Now,
how did that strike you?
I didn't.
That would
have
have to be a traumatic experience. No, not you.
I didn't have that much to do with it. I call it it. I'm not sure whether it was he or she, but I didn't have that much to do with it.
But you accepted his presence as something normal for...
What else do you do? You're working next to this thing.
True.
You know, it's, how are you? Hi, you know, that sort of
Want to go out for coffee and donuts?
Yeah.
He spoke in a hissy voice, you know, hissed a lot, and sort of sounded like he was loud whispering most of the time. And then we had those little ugly things.
The gray type?
Yeah, and then we had the 5-footers and the 3-footers. We used to, get away, you bother me.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that was the way you handle those, and those things smelled. In fact, there's an odd recollection I have for both the reptilian man and the Greys, the little Greys. The little Greys, I think the idea that's floating around the UFO community that they absorb their food through the skin and excrete through the skin is correct. Because my memories of those Greys stunk to high heaven. They smelled like bowel and fecal matter and urine. And we used to regularly, if we had to work with them, we'd pick the thing up physically and throw it in the shower and wash it. Because we couldn't take the odor of it. And one day, I don't know who it was, got the bright idea, well, after we clean them, let's spray them with Lysol. Maybe they'll smell better for a while. They got him drunk. He loved the Lysol. The Greys would go in the commissary getting cans of Lysol and spraying themselves with it. They loved it. And then...
Even though it's true story, it's a good laugher. I don't know. It's great entertainment.
And then the other thing that we ran across, I needed some sodium hydroxide for a special soldering project. Of course, we all know Drano is essentially sodium hydroxide. So I went to the commissary, got a can of Drano. So I took a glass, put some water in it, dissolved the Drano in it. I was using this as flux of solid wood. His Highness Draco comes in.
Oh, no.
And he said, more! So I got another glass of water, poured some more Drano in it, handed it to him. And the Draco was getting drunk on Drano. How the hell they could stomach that stuff, I don't know. So finally, he really tied a rag on.
Tune in at 11.
He really tied on a rag. He must have drank about 8 glasses of water made of the heavy, thick Drano. Yeah, I put enough in so it was thick, because I was using a solder paste. And gulp. And finally, he came back to normal sense. He asked me, how do you make that stuff? That's the greatest stuff he'd ever had. So I told him, go get some Drano. And they had to keep buying more and more Drano. Because the reptilians were getting drunk on the Drano, and they had to buy more Lysol because the Greys were getting drunk on the Lysol.
That's the reason why the project
reptilians would get falling down drunk on the Drano.
That's funny.
Were they involved in the project then, directly?
I think they were there more as advisors. This is what I think they were there as advisors.
Were they there of their free will?
It seemed to be.
Yeah.
Because they were treated well by the station management. it was almost like, "Your Highness, how are you?" They were kowtowing to the reptilian. With these boys, outside the research end of it, would have multiple parts of the project. They would take these boys and they would essentially indoctrinate them, and they would whip them to within an inch of their life. You know, bestiality, brutality. The idea was they wanted to break the mind. When the mind was broken at that extreme point of fear, there were two things they were interested in. There had to be an alien.
We're going to have a lot more stuff coming, I can guarantee you that.
Essentially, what they would do is they would go out into the public. They first looked for streetwise. They were interested mainly in blonde, blue-eyed boys. They centered on the ages of maybe 10 to 16, 17. Although, as Duncan pointed out, they went a lot younger, a lot older. And what they would do...
Prove the time that's difficult. But that will come hopefully in time. It's just like, so that's basically what I'm here, is to add some credibility to what they're saying, not to swallow their story, but to, there's something here that warrants investigation and further investigation, and that's what my role is in, as I say, writing the first book. We're working on a second book and also publishing a newsletter to further inform people on what we are finding. And I think we're going to be very, very...
Then they would use the transmitter and put that mind, that new mind, back into the body through a human psychic adept, would like reinstall it through psychosexual means. Now, the reason they picked Duncan for this is he's blonde, blue-eyed, the whole 9 yards of it. So they had to pick blonde, blue-eyed people because part of Duncan's mind would become part of the boy's mind. Means the boy would have a third his original mind, in connection into this, because there's reports of some sort of technological device that would gather the patterns of fear. There's also reports that there were some hormones removed from the bodies after the height of fear point. Secondly, they would electromagnetically capture the mind patterns that were released from the body. They were stored in a big computer system. They would manipulate and redesign the mind, literally redesign